Hakurios meth humon. Diathomen. O Lord, through spiritual discipline, you strengthened your servant Monica to persevere in offering her love and prayers and tears for the conversion of her husband and of Augustine, their son. Deepen our devotion, we pray, and use us in accordance with your will to bring others, even our own kindred, to acknowledge Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Now, tomorrow is actually the feast of St. Monica, but we can use her collect on an eve of feast. And she is one of the windows in the sanctuary of the church. If you go under the rood screen and look around to your right, you will see that she is the middle window between St. Pancras and St. Augustine. And as you know, she is the patron saint of parents of wayward children. So probably has been invoked rather constantly throughout the centuries. Jasmine has another commitment tonight. Dale is not feeling well, so I believe we're all here. And this is the first time some of you have been here in a while, so we're going to kind of like go back and calibrate where we are and what we're doing. Fair enough? Now, did everybody get the very useful chart that Amelia prepared? Okay. And did everybody get the printout of the translation we're working on? Okay, so we're pretty much in the same place in terms of what we're working on. Sure. Since we haven't met for a while, let's, and we're getting into some pretty detailed stuff here. Last week when we met, we were working in lesson 13. And also working on our translation. Now, there seems to have been a little bit of disagreement and or confusion, whatever, about what our translation assignment was. Some people took it as verses 11 through 19, others as verses 11 through 31. It is 11 through 31. We actually went through about 16 last week, I think. Okay, 19 through 31. So we went through about 16 or 17. Last week, so we'll take up from there when we get going. And I will confess to you that when I went back and looked at my own efforts to translate this chapter of John, I realized that there are probably things in here that will give you fits. And there are a number of things that we just haven't encountered yet. Now, what's our rule when we encounter stuff that we don't know what it is? Throw a fit, right. Pitch a fit and jump in it. Actually, it's circle it and move on, right? Figure out what else we can find in the sentence that we can translate. At the diocesan meeting last Saturday in Appleton, when we had Dwight Shiley in talking about the Agile Church, or let's just say faithful innovation in a disruptive age. I actually went up Friday night as a member of the CCV to get things ready for the meeting. And that Saturday morning early in the hotel lobby, I noticed there was a man sitting there, and he was reading his Bible sitting in the hotel lobby, and he had on a T-shirt that said in Greek, Theophiles. So let's play with that just a minute. Let me get a marker here. This is what was written on his T-shirt. Theophiles. How would any of you translate that? Well, first of all, what kind of word is it?
Oh, it's one word? It's not two words?
It's one word. What kind of word is it? It's a noun. Could it be anything besides a noun? Okay. And so, who wants to take a stab at translating it? Come. God and love. Good. We got two roots in there, right? Here's my question. Does it mean lover of God, or does it mean beloved of God? No. Well, I went up to the gentleman and I said, I like your T-shirt. So tell me, does it mean lover of God, or does it mean beloved of God? And he said, that's the point. Because the only way you're going to figure that out is in context, right? And so perhaps he was subscribing to reader response theory in biblical criticism, but you really just taking the one word can't say which way is it heading, right? Which way is it pointing? Is this a lover of God, or is it beloved of God? And it actually, is there a difference between being a lover of God and being beloved of God?
Depends on his reaction.
Theologically, is there a difference between being a lover of God and being beloved of God? Now, I'm going to leave you with that question so that when you hear the epistle this Sunday from 1 John chapter 5, which you've translated, you can consider what the answer to that question might be. Is a lover of God and a beloved of God the same thing or not? Look at that in the context of the 5th chapter of 1 John. This Sunday we're going to get verses 9 through 15. So play with that theologically. And we might just have to get some T-shirts for the class, right? And say that we'll see who on the street might ask us, hey, does that mean? Right? Now, I suggest to you that if you're sitting around a hotel lobby on a Saturday morning reading your Bible, that's a wonderful thing. How often do you see it? Right? So, this was somebody who had a particular relationship with Scripture and knew enough to know that the Greek might be a bit ambiguous here. So, let's look at chapter 13. We're dealing with primary, middle, and passive endings for primary tenses. Now, this is going to be additional review for those of you who were here last week, but even last week a lot of people were kind of going homina, 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 so we'll review it again. We've so far learned the endings for 6 tenses, the active endings for 6 tenses. And we've learned primary and secondary active endings. Now we're going to look at middle passive endings. And they're going to be 2 sets, but we're going to focus on the primary middle passive endings, which are going to be used only in the present, the future, and the perfect tenses. So, quick review. We know what present tense is, right? When we say something is present, active, indicative, what are we saying? It's present tense. The voice of the verb is active, and the mood is indicative. And what does indicative mean? It's reality, right? It could be present active subjunctive, right? And what do we say subjunctive is? Possibility or conditional, right? We tend to think of might, may, could, should, maybe even would. There are going to be exceptions to that because, particularly in Greek, the idea of it being conditional doesn't work quite so directly as might, could, may, would, should does in English. Elizabeth, going back to German, what's the difference between dürfen und müssen? Right. One is, you got to do it. The other is, it's a good idea. It's, for example, in legal philosophy, we could talk about a distinction between one being obliged to do something or not to do something as a legal duty, and one being obligated to do something or not to do something. Obligation is truly a legal duty. Obliged is, well, it's what we might call a morality of aspiration, right? If we look at the Ten Commandments, we'd say, this looks like actually something that's not conditional. Thou shalt not, right? But if we sit there and say, I should or I aspire to be more faithful in how I follow Jesus, and I'm going to do that by, Bible study and Ignatian examine or something. We're starting to talk about something that's more what we are obliged to be. We're called to be rather than obligated to be. Not the best example there, but when we talk about present, we know what that is. Future, we've looked at future active indicative and how the subjunctive applies to that. What about perfect? What does perfect mean in tense? What's a perfect tense? Action which began in the past, which is completed, right? So that's what we're going to look at this week, present, future, and perfect tenses. And we see these middle passive endings that were devised by, wicked Greek people to challenge people with lisps, right? So we have my, sai, tai, simple enough. But then we get metha, este, and ente. And you're just going to have to memorize those. The same way we did oase, amen, eti, usi. We need to come up with a mnemonic for my, sai, tai, metha, este, ente. I guess it works with oase, so let's try it. Ready? My, sai, tai, metha, este, ente. I can't do that. Can't do it. You can practice that, but the same way you do oase, amen, eti, usi, try my, sai, tai, metha, este, ente. And when we say a passive voice, what do we mean? The subject is being acted upon. Now, let's go back to even earlier review. Subject and object. Talked about this a little bit in the sermon, right, last Sunday. But in any sentence, the verb is going to have a subject and an object, right?
Not really.
Okay,
Not
we can.
if it uses the to be verb.
Right, not if we use a verb of being, and there are certain predicates that will vary that rule. But if we sit there and take a simple sentence and say subject is the one doing the action in an active verb, right? And the object is what is being acted upon. Carl picks up the book. What's the verb? Picks up. Who's the subject? Carl. The object is the book.
Actually, picks up might be considered an adverb.
Okay.
Picks is the technical verb.
fair enough. See what I have to live with? No.
You're so lucky.
I know. I didn't. I never had English grammar in school. I learned English grammar by having to study Greek. Incidentally, there's a very good, useful book in my office that's English Grammar for Greek Students. And so any grammar questions you have about what is he talking about, it goes through all that. There's a separate one, English Grammar for Hebrew students, things like that. So, passive voice, the subject of the verb is being acted upon. Somebody come up with an example for me. Yeah, the book was lifted by Carl. Yeah, the book was picked up, although she would say that that wasn't really, pure verb. So lifted works. And we see a paradigm at the bottom of page 60 that, basically gives us present, future, and perfect of how this works in passive voice, depending on who the person is. I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, you, y'all are, they are. I shall be, I have been. Fairly straightforward. When we turn the page, we get, however, to the middle voice, which is a lot less straightforward for English speakers. Here, the subject participates in the action. Now, what does that immediately tell you is going to be a rich vein to mine? Once we start talking about theology, when we're saying the subject participating in the action, we've got all kinds of possibilities. If we go back to a classical, well, not really classical, a Thomistic worldview, what is, or who or what is the prime mover? The ultimate subject, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. Jesus, right, okay. God, if we go back and look at a medieval worldview, for example, we say, here's Earth, and it's surrounded by a number of the spheres of the heavens, right? And we have the sphere of the moon and the sun, and then we go up through the stars, the fixed stars, and then we get to the Empyrean, and we get the unmoved mover, the first cause in our Aristotelian philosophy. The first cause is everything begins with God, right? He doesn't change, right? God is immutable, impassible. And so if all actions in the known universe find their origin in the first cause, the unmoved mover, the primum mobile, what does that mean in terms of any actions we take in seeking to live God's will? That we are participating in the action of God, even though it might not be stated in the middle voice. And it may be in many cases, but even though it may not be stated in the middle voice, if I say that in order to do God's will, I have to allow his will to occupy him by surrendering my own will to God, starts looking like that middle voice is going to be kind of useful, right? I'm participating in the action, but who's doing it? What does Jesus say in the 15th chapter of John that we heard last week and that will continue in this week? I am the vine, you are the branches, you can do nothing apart from me. And what are we supposed to do? Abide in the vine in order that we may bear fruit. Whose fruit? God's fruit, right. But we're participating in that. Or if we look at Marian theology, Mary says yes to the angel Gabriel. Mary's yes is a necessary cause for God's will to come about. But it's God's will, right? I mean, theoretically, Mary could have said no, right? Her yes in cooperating with God's will and surrendering her will became a necessary, independent cause for the incarnation. Now, if you go back to Aristotelian philosophy that does come into theology through St. Thomas, you get 4 different kinds of causes that are all necessary for something to happen. Mary's yes, however, is absolutely necessary. And so all I'm saying about the middle voice is, as weird as the middle voice sounds in English, there's a lot of theology around this. And if you're a biblical literalist, you might use this as part of your argument to say, this is why the New Testament arises when it does and is written in Greek, as opposed to, I don't know, Sanskrit. I don't know enough about Sanskrit to know how the verbs work, but, you know. Or we could make arguments about how the cal perfect verb in Hebrew being timeless, it's necessary for Hebrew to be used for God's will to be revealed in a certain way, something like that. These arguments have been made, okay? They're not novel. But the middle voice, the reason I'm going on for 5 minutes now about the middle voice is it's just weird to English speakers. And I just want you to, put your theological thinking hats on when you encounter the middle voice. Because if we are the subject participating in the action of the verb, okay, there may be another, actor that we can see as a human or material cause, but maybe not in theology. So how are we going to recognize present and middle passive indicatives? First, we're going to find that they are attached to the present stem. Simple enough. We know where to look for that. That's going to be in the lexical form. So how are we going to find the stem of a verb that we found in the lexicon? Right, remove the omega. We're going to take off the first person singular ending. And if we come to our old friend, luo, the stem would be lu, right? Lambda, upsilon. So we're going to look for the present stem, and then we're going to look for a connecting vowel that's either going to be an omicron or an epsilon. This was the same with most of the active endings, right? But when we get to psi, which is what? My, psi, tai, I, you, second person singular. When we get to psi, it's going to collapse, basically. And we're going to get an eta with an iota subscript. How are we going to pronounce that? Want to do that again? What'd you say? You're going to say A is what you're going to say. A? Come again? No. So really, if we look at luo, what we're looking at there is luesai, but we're not going to pronounce it that way. We're going to say lue, because it's going to collapse into the eta with an iota subscript. The forms of the present middle and the present passive indicatives are the same. Their translations are different. The passive voice has the subject being acted upon by another, while the middle voice has the subject being acted upon, but in such a way as to participate in doing the action. So how are we going to know whether it's passive or middle? It's going to be contextual, right? We're going to have to figure it out from context on the basis of what is the actor doing. So we see here luomai, lue, luetai, luometha, lueste, and luontai. I am loosed, or I loose for myself. What does that look like, to loose for yourself? What kind of harness? Repelling. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So it could be just how we interact with something material. Let's go to our old friend blepo. If I make that blepomai, I could say I am seen, or I see for myself. Now, that one I'll probably figure out more quickly based on what else is going on in the sentence. Because if I'm looking for I am seen, I'm going to have to figure out in the sentence who's seeing me. If I'm trying to figure out I see for myself, I'm going to try to figure out that something else is being named in the sentence as being seen, right? So it can be very confusing here, but what are we looking for? Primary stem, connecting vowel, and a middle or passive ending, primary, middle, or passive ending. Same thing with the future, except that the future distinguishes the middle and the passive voice. So let's look at that. Future middle indicative. Now, what do we do in present active indicative to make it into future active indicative? We add a sigma. And we know that that could be a hidden sigma, right? There could be some things that collapse. We know how we get what's called a consonantal blend. And if I take a P and a sigma, what do I get? Let's go back to our friend blepo. So I've dropped the omega, and I've got on the stem blep. I've got a P. Not right now, actually. I can wait. But I've got the ending consonant there is a P, and I'm going to add a sigma to it. What do I get? A psi. So it would be blepso. Blepo would be I see. Blepso, I will see, I shall see. I'm old-fashioned enough to say when we use the first person future, it's shall, but I'm old-fashioned. We know how the rules for consonantal blends work between what? Labials, dentals, and gutturals. These are going to be back early on, like the third unit in the book when we get to future. So go back and look at those, because you're going to need to know that for this. So we add a sigma, and we take the future stem, which is the present stem plus the sigma. So again, let's take blepo as an example. We've dropped the omega to make it into blep. We've added the sigma to make it into bleps. And now we're going to add a connecting vowel, probably an omicron because we had an omega there. And we're going to add one of the primary middle passive endings. So if I took blepo, made it bleps, and made it blepsomai, I shall loose for myself in my own interest. Or I shall see for myself in my own. I shall see for myself would be blepso. But notice that the passive takes a different form, because the sigma gets replaced by theta, eta, sigma. These, right? And here's where they're playing with lispers like me. So if we were to stay with blepo, somebody do that for me and make it future passive, blepo. Make it I shall be seen. Yeah, blephesomai. I shall be seen. So what do we look for? Present stem, thes, connecting vowel, and primary middle passive endings. It's actually easier in the future, right, than in the present because we're going to get different endings. We're going to keep going, and then we're going to play some translation here. Perfect middle passive indicatives, page 63. Both take the same form as the primary middle passive endings. So, mai, sai, tai, metha, este, ente. What do we do with a perfect just on its own? We do some reduplication, right? And so we're going to see reduplication here, but unlike the present perfect, we're not going to see a kappa alpha. So if I take luo, to reduplicate that, I make it what? Leluo, right? I'd reduplicate it. Here, I do that and put the middle passive endings on it, and I get lelumai, lesuthai, lelusai, lelutai, lelumetha, leluste, leluntai. Reduplication, present active stem, no connecting vowel, primary middle passive endings. Now, he's thrown in here on page 63 the future of ami. What does ami mean? I am, right? Why is it, incidentally, that if the infinitive of the verb is anai, eta, or not eta, epsilon iota, nu, alpha iota, why is it that whenever we talk about the verb for to be, we refer to it as me rather than einai? Because ene means to be, and me means I am. So why do we always refer to it as me rather than enai? That's one theory. Any others? Lexical form. We refer to verbs by the way they're found in the lexicon, which is first person present active indicative. So even though we're used to in English always referring to a verb by its infinitive form, and Greek verbs do have infinitive forms, we don't refer to Greek verbs by their infinitive form. We refer to them by their first person present active indicative form. And that confuses people sometimes because they're thinking of the verb to be, they're going for enai, and they don't find it. So we always look it up in the lexical form. Now, we see here the future, esomai, esse, estai, esametha, esseste, essantai. I shall be. You will be. Okay, let's play with that one. And we haven't really been translating English into Greek, but we can think of the protest song from the 60s, made famous by Joan Baez. Any day now, I shall be released. Now, forget any day now. We could play with that. How would I say I shall be released in Greek? Go back to our friend Luo. Luthesomai, I shall be loosed. What is the word for day? Himera. But we don't use indefinite articles, right? Right? So this is an easy one. Probably not accurate, but let's play with it, right? Himera, himera. And luthesomai. Any day now, I shall be released. You didn't live in the 60s? I didn't either, but you couldn't avoid her on like the evening news. You know what I mean? You know, watched Walter Cronkite. Lightning outside. Okay. Okay. And just to throw you some more beyond this, and then we're going to start translating, we see the present, middle, and passive subjunctives. Now, before we even look at what the rule is, if we say the present or the middle passive indicatives, we do what? We add a middle passive ending after a connecting vowel, and the connecting vowel is an omicron or an epsilon, without even reading what the rule is going to be. What are we going to do? We're just going to make the connecting vowel long, right? And so rather than an epsilon or an omicron, we're going to have an eta or an omega. So if we see a secondary passive ending or a primary middle passive ending, and we see a long connecting vowel, bingo. We're going to say, oh, this is a middle passive subjunctive. Our friend, the long vowel, will save us. Here, turn to page 64 and you see that. Luomai, I should be loosed, or I may loose myself. Lue, you should be loosed. Luetai. Notice the long. Now, we get kind of messed up there with lue, right? That one's going to be hard to figure out. But if we look at le luometha, we should be loosed, we see the long connecting vowel. If that was an omicron and it was loametha, we wouldn't say we should be loosed, but we shall be loosed, right? Oh, no, that would be the future. We would say we are loosed. And finally, there's a lot here in chapter 13, right? We get what are called deponent verbs. All that means for present purposes is the lexical form doesn't have an omega on the end. It has a first person middle passive ending, my. And the one that we've encountered so much is erchomai. And that's the lexical form for a deponent verb. Now, almost all the rules we've looked at so far have related to omega class verbs. We're seeing some deponent verbs in here. We're also going to encounter another class of verb. They're rare. They're called me verbs. Mu, iota. Don't worry about those right now. If you know the omega class and get all these endings down, you're going to get most of this stuff. There'll still be some words that you circle in translations. But think about where we've gotten. We have translated a complete book of the Bible, 1 John. By the time we finish this translation exercise, we will have translated a complete chapter of a gospel. Right? Okay, we're still in Johannine literature. We'll probably do a chapter in, I don't know, maybe Mark, which is not as hard as Luke. We're not going to do any Pauline letters, you know. We're going to stay with pretty simple Greek here. Fair enough? Keep turning the pages here, and let's go to page 65. And let's look at the homework. We did the words last week, and if you have done the homework on your own, fine. If you are stuck on any of the homework, at the break, catch somebody who was here last week. Let's look at the sentences. Hoi anthropoi baptisontai hupoton matheton tu kuriou. We'll take it a word at a time. Hoi anthropoi. The people. All right? Baptisontai. Let's take this one apart. What ending is on it? My, psi, tai. Okay. I, you, he, she, it. This is singular. Baptisontai. What's baptizo? Okay. So we got a plural hoi anthropoi, and now we've got a singular verb. And what would we translate as baptizon tai as? He is baptized, right? Hupo ton, what? My sai tai. Metha este ente, right? Oh, wait a minute. You're right. It's ente here. I'm just doing tai. I'm messing up. Sorry. All right. Baptizon tai. Thank you. Okay, so it is plural. Hoi anthropai, baptizon tai. The people are baptized. Hupo ton matheton tu kurio. What's hupo mean? Okay, dependent on the case, right? By means of. And we see what endings on ton matheton tu kurio. Genitive. Ton matheton, plural. Disciples, tu kurio, of the Lord. The people are baptized by means of, let's just say by. The people are baptized by the disciples of the Lord. The people are baptized by the Lord's disciples. You can play with that one and see how it works. Next one. Ho prophetes tu theu. What's the article? Singular. The prophet of God, ekporeutai kai, iserketai tein ecclesiain. Now, what are the last two words of the sentence? Yeah, the assembly, the gathering. You can make it church if you want. What's the case? Tein ecclesiain. Right. Okay. So what we have to figure out is these two verbs here that do have third person singular ending. Ekporeutai and iserketai. How are we going to look those up? Okay, so you started at erkomai. Did you find it?
Yeah, I think it goes into, because it's like,
Okay, ice would be iserkomai, right? And if we say erkomai means what? I come, right? And so iserkomai means what? I come into. Or we might say I go into. What about ek-erkomai? Would be out of. But is this one really from erkomai? Ekporeutai. So anybody find something in a lexicon that looks louder, Elizabeth? Poreuomai. Okay, so the prophet of God comes out of and goes into the church. How is that not an active verb? Do we translate it as the prophet of God is brought out of and into the church? Or comes out of and goes into the church for himself? We don't have enough to do that here, do we? Could be middle, could be passive. but it's not active. It's got a middle passive ending. Take a look in your Bibles at John 11:21. Ipen un he Martha pros ton Iesun. What does Ipen mean? It's from Lego. It's aorist, right? And it is third person singular aorist. So said, un, post positive here. 11:21, John 11:21. What do we do with un? Well, we've encountered it before, so let's just say therefore. Said therefore, hey Martha. Said therefore, Martha. Pros ton Iesun. To the Jesus. Said therefore the Martha to the Jesus, Kyrie. Now, question. I start our evening by saying, Ho Kyrios meth humon. The Lord be with you. And the nominative form is Kyrios, right? And we're used to, the different cases here. What is Kyrie? Is this a case we've encountered before? Not really. This is the vocative, okay? So, Lord, I eis hode. If I eis that's a past tense of eimi. Third or second person, singular, if you were here. Hode is here. Eis, you were. Because of how we decline that verb, we can say this is second person, singular, past tense of eimi. If you were here, uk. Not. An apethanen ho adelphos mu. Okay, so let's work with what we can figure out. Ho adelphos mu, the brother of me, my brother. So we have to figure out an apethanen.
On means conditional.
Okay, it's a conditional conjunction. So we really only have to figure out apethanen. Anybody want to stab at that in the lexicon? What form is that? Well, it kind of has to be a verb based on the rest of the phrase, right? So we're going to say, we got to figure out what the stem is, and we might be desperate. So we might just start looking in the lexicon, right? Or could there be some reduplication going on here? What is the ending? Third person singular, okay. finding anything? Well, let's just start with the letters then and see if anything gets close. We find apethanon, aorist of apothenisko. No, apothnisko. Starting to sound like apothecaries here, like a drugstore, right? Apothnisko. Do we find apothnisko? To die, to face death, not would have died, the brother of me. So, all of you who are into word origins, how is it that we get a word that refers to druggist, apothecary, from a Greek verb to die, to face death? Well, certainly, given the drugs that are available when the language is developing, it's one of the reasons why we, in older forms of English, would refer to a surgeon as a leech, right? We might play with what apothecary. Here's a good bit of trivia for you. What is this symbol? Prescription, but what does it mean? It comes from recipe Jehovah in Latin. Yeah. Formula put together by God. And so apothecaries are claiming a very high source. On that note, we'll take a 5-minute break. And there are donut holes left over from this morning. This is the aorist of apothnisko. Well, it doesn't just give us words listed as saying this is the aorist of something. Why would it do that in this case? Right. You're going to find some words in the lexicon where they're basically going to give you a punt and say there's no way you'll find this. And so we're going to give you a way to work back to what it is. They're rare.
So we could look up Thanatos and get the answer.
You could look up Thanatos and then never get it. I mean, you know it's got to have something to do with that.
Yeah.
But we're going to, now, we know the verse well enough that we sit there and say, my brother wouldn't have died. But, we can't come up with a translation explanation of what is happening. But it's really
So,
and I don't know that they use it anymore. But it makes themselves to the pulpit. That's one of those same things. So I wonder if that serves the same purpose.
Oh, well, some of those are acoustic.
Yeah.
When you go into New England congregational churches, they get a 3-story pulpit. You know, it'll go up, and the preacher, as he faces down, there's a sound tube there with the speaking trumpet that comes out of the bottom. So it's like, God is speaking from the pulpit.
From on high. I'm not looking at you. What are you looking at?
What is this, a taxi driver? Because it's not in Hebrew. And it's a shire reed. Sheriff. That's what the word comes from, shire reed. One who sets the boundaries, controls the boundaries of the shire. This is rogation Sunday. It's supposed to beat the children.
That's not true. They beat the children. The
You're
children
originally
beat the
supposed to
bounds.
beat the bounds of the parish. You're supposed to go along willow lawns and mark, beat down all the grass and mark where the boundaries of the parish are.
Mark your territory.
But that quickly evolves in, 14th century, that you took the male children to the bounds, and while you were beating the bounds, you beat them. Because cursed be the man who forgets his 100. This is your territory. And we tell you what the limits are. So when we were in Cambridge, we belonged to one of 4 parishes in the United Kingdom that still beat the bounds. And of course, this is on concrete and stone around Cambridge with Japanese tourists taking pictures of it. You go on the willow sticks, hitting the street with a procession with smoke and a banner. But we took our children along, and I was explaining to them we were supposed to meet William when we got to, where we had to turn or something like that. He wasn't amused by that. It actually ended up being a bit of a pub crawl, actually, but downtown Cambridge.
No, there you've just redeemed it. Right there.
The big canopy in the Vatican in St. Peter, that would be referred to in Italian as a baldacchino, a huge thing with those spiral Bernini columns up. That's the baldacchino of St. Peter. That's just the Italian thing.
Italian one.
But you'll sometimes see that used in English. Sometimes if you see it in print, it'll just be for the baldacchino.
For that only that
No,
particular
just
one?
for the word, because there is no real English word. I mean, they say it's a deceit. It's never a deceit.
Well, that's
Good.
what I did.
I found out an interesting little bit. South Carolina was founded by people from Barbados. The original colonists in South Carolina weren't in England. They were from the colony of Barbados that came up and said, let's just, get a slave culture going here. And the Barbadians were all people who left England because of the years of primogeniture. Second son isn't going to. And the heraldic symbol for a second son is a crescent moon. Look at the flag of South Carolina. It's got a crescent moon on it with the palmetto tree. Because it was founded by second sons of the Barbadians. They were perpetuating that pattern, Who knew?
This is from Italian.
Okay.
That Wikipedia?
I can't see that. Yeah, baldacchino.
Yeah, but that gives, and your spelling?
Okay. Well, I'm right.
It's the second one.
Well, yeah, but, hey. I did find out why there are crescent moons on outhouses. They're actually gender markings. Crescent moon for male and a star for female. But most outhouses, I have never seen one either.
That's because girls don't need them. Because we're such delicate flowers. That's my story. I'll stick it to it.
Who was the famous guy in English history who died in an outhouse? I don't remember who that was. That's going to bother me. I'll have to remember that. Okay, we're going to switch to translation. And we are in chapter 20 of John's Gospel. And where did we end up? 16. So we're starting at verse 17. You do now. We're starting at verse 17. Lege aute ho Jesus. Pretty straightforward, right? Shout it out. Said to her that Jesus, me mu aptu. Not me touch, not me hold. Yes, it is the primary imperative of aptomai. This is the imperative. Not one we've really encountered yet, okay? It's a different mood. Okay, you circled it. So this is the primary imperative, primary middle imperative, not primary middle imperative of aptomai. Yes, aptomai. Alpha, P, tau, omicron, mu, alpha, iota. And we see that Jesus is speaking here. We see the beginning of a quotation in May with a capital. So not me touch, not me hold. Hupo. Anybody else get something for hupo here? Look at the, I messed up. It's not hupo. It's upo. Look at the breathing mark. Upo. First hint. We've got oo in there. Not. And we've got a date of ending. Not yet. Not yet. Not me told, not yet. How would we translate that? Don't hold on to me. Stop holding me. Something like that. But literally, says to her Jesus, not me, touch or hold, not yet. Gar. For, or perhaps indeed here. Anabepika. Oh, you know why we're getting messed up here? It's because of the lack of punctuation, of course. So, says to her, Jesus, not me, touch, hold. And then, in English, we'd put a comma in there before upo, because that's starting another phrase.
Before upo?
Right. And so, not yet, indeed, or for not yet. Not yet, indeed. I'm saying it's not here. We have to supply it in English. After up to. Now, just a word of warning here. We've got a whole chapter here. And in order to not have to cut and paste 30-some verses here, how many? 31 verses from the Greek Orthodox Bible or from the SBL or something like that. I basically cut and pasted the whole chapter. And the only way you can do that is to do it from the Textus Receptus, which is from the 16th century. So you're still going to see a lot of things that just don't have punctuation here. And there may be one or two words that are going to vary from what you're going to find in your current SBL Bible. Fair enough? So here's an example. In English, we're going to put a comma in there and say, not yet, indeed. Anabepica.
I took the ana off the front and found that bepica could be perfect from balo,
And balo is
throw.
throw.
And I found something that said ana, I think each, but I don't know.
Okay, what is ana as a preposition?
That's not a proposition that we have.
Look back on page, where are we? 20. Up or again. So ana, up. So you're saying throw up? Not indeed throw up. No. Okay, this is the perfect indicative active of anabino. Different verb. Alpha, nu alpha, beta, alpha, iota, nu omega. Anabino. Right. And it's not yet indeed, have I ascended. Pros ton patera. Pros to the Father. Pros ton patera. Mu, the Father mine, right? So let's English that. Says to her Jesus, not me, hold. Not yet, indeed, have I ascended to the Father mine. If we're going to English that, we're going to say, Jesus said to her, do not hold me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. What does the RSV do with that? Let's look at an old standby here. What verse is that? 17. Jesus said to her, do not hold me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Why does the RSV make it to the Father when it's clearly ton patera mu, to my Father?
An adjective of the
Okay, you might be right. Because we don't have any punctuation here to really guide us, right? Okay. All right, let's take that as read then and say mu poreu. And what is poreu? Okay. Anybody else find anything there? We're dealing with a deponent verb here, poreomai. P, omicron, rho, epsilon, upsilon, omicron, mu, alpha, iota, poreomai, to go or to journey. Mu poreu de pros tus adelphus mu. Yeah, to the brothers of me, or to my brothers. And so we would say de is a post-positive. And we could make that something like but, or therefore, or moreover. You know, we could play with that. But let's just try but. But to the brothers of me. Okay, so that looks more like, oh, you know why it is? It's because, we're getting an imperative form here. The imperative voice is entering here. And so it's saying, go, but go to my brothers. Kai aipe autois. It's also an imperative, yes. And say to them. It's an aorist imperative. How is that past tense if he's telling her to go do something? No. This is an example of how we default to past tense temporarily in aorist. But aorist is not always past tense. It means completed action. Completed actions. And say to them. Make it happen. This is imperative. And say to them what? Well, we got another capital in here. Anabino. It is. I ascend. I go up. I am ascending, perhaps you could say. I go up. Pros ton patera mu, kai patera humon. I go up to the Father of me and Father of y'all. Kai theon mu, kai theon humon. And God of me and God of y'all. Which the RSV renders as, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. That one was pretty straightforward once we got anabino, right? And her sister Sarah, Anna and Sarah Bino, you remember them? She never laughs at my joke, no. Because she never pays attention to anything I say. No. She doesn't react, right? You know. Okay, verse 18. Erkatai. Don't shout it out, just you, okay? Erkatai. Okay, Bobby, what's erkatai? Yeah, comes, right? This is primary indicative middle passive. Comes, Maria he Magdalene. Comes, Mary the Magdalene. Apangelusa. Anybody find the underlying verb? But what's lusa there? You probably circled this, right? Don't shout it out. Why would you have circled it? So we haven't studied this yet. This is a participle from apangelo. Apangelusa, bringing word. Comes Mary the Magdalene, bringing word. Tois mathetais, to the disciples. Hoti, eoraken, rao. We might just skip hoti here. It could be that. But eoraken. What's the underlying? Orao. And so what's eoraken? It's not pluperfect, it's perfect. So I have seen ton kurion. I have seen the Lord. Orao again. Now, what do we do with orao versus blepo versus ideo versus theoreo? It's a little bit stronger than I've eyeballed Jesus, right? That would be blepo. It's not ideo. It's not theoreo. I have looked upon him and tried to figure this out and classify things. A little bit different from theoreo. It's a little bit different from I have ideoed him. I have made sense out of this sense experience. If I've araoed him, I have experienced him. Now, those 4 words you'll recall when we get earlier in this chapter, in the first 9 verses. The first 3, and then we get orao here in Mary. How do they get translated in the RSV and NRSV? All the same way. He saw, she saw, he saw. I saw Esau sitting on a seesaw. Esau, he saw me. They mean 4 different things. Don't know why they get translated that way. If we take ideo, for example, and you go and look at an analytical lexicon of the Greek New Testament, what is translated here as know is translated 9 out, or a see, I saw, is translated 9 out of 10 times as know. Now, how do we do that in English? You've just made an important point to me in an argument, right? And I say, I see. It means I understand, right? And that's what John, and so if we go back, we get the resurrection of Jesus. The women show up, Jesus isn't there, right? And then they go and they tell Peter and the beloved disciple, and the 2 of them come running. And the beloved disciple gets there first. And he bends down and he looks in the tomb, and it says that he saw the linen cloths. And in that instance, he blepoed them. There it is. And then Peter comes running, gets there second, goes in the tomb. And it says that he saw the linen cloths, except he theoreoed them. Which means that he's trying to make sense out of this. He's getting a visual impression and trying to classify what's going on. And then the beloved disciple comes into the tomb and sees the linen cloths and the face wrapping. And it says that he ideoed them, which means now that he's figuring things out. He's starting to know what's going on here. And then Mary shows up here after the men have left. And she comes to the disciples and says, I've oraoed him. This is really real. She has seen and experienced him. She has personal knowledge of this sense experience that she is conveying to the other disciples. So the same way John in chapter 21 is going to play with the words for love, agape, philos, he's doing the same thing here with verbs of perception. He loves to do this. He's playing with verbs of perception, and he's saying to us, here's how you're going to experience the risen Lord. Are you going to blepo him? Are you going to theoreo him? Are you going to ideo him? Are you going to orao him, right? What would Scooby do? Orao, right? Huh? That's a bumper sticker I keep seeing in town. Seriously. I think it's supposed to mock faith, but I keep seeing a bumper sticker in town that says, what would Scooby do? So,
So is this like is this a progression of understanding the faith?
yes, that's what John's up to. There's a progressive understanding that Jesus is risen. He's not dead. He's not in the tomb.
So
Mary Magdalene gets it, which is why She, having been sent by Jesus, is called what in the Eastern Church? The apostle to the apostles. So Jesus uses the imperative. Where were we? Go to the brothers of me and say to them. And now she sits there and she does. Comes Maria he Magdalene apangelusa tois mathetes hoti oraken ton kurion. Kai tauta ipen aute. Kai and tauta, these things, ipen, he said to her. So we actually, to English this, have to make it, and that these things he had said to her. It works in Greek. It doesn't work in English unless we supply that, right?
So what are the last words?
Kai tauta ipen aute, and paren, that, close paren, these things he said or had said. No, said, because it's aorist. He said to her. That's the aorist of Lego. Third person singular. Which takes us to 19. Well, actually, let's double check it in the RSV. Verse 18 becomes, Mary Magdalene went. That's how they've Englished the middle passive voice there. Mary Magdalene went and said to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. What are these things? Yeah, I'm ascending to my Father and to your Father. I am going to God and to your God. Right? So we get to verse 19. Uses un opsias. No, that's a psi, not a phi. Uses un osias. Don't just circle uses. It is a participle of a me. It being. You found it. Okay, so that's one of those ones they punted on in the lexicon. Okay, so it being un, therefore, opsias, evening, opsias, te himera aikene, the day same, te mia, nope. First, right, the first. It being therefore evening, the day same, the first, which the RSV makes on the evening of that day, the first day of the week. See how they just added a whole bunch of stuff to make sense out of that? Whereas in Greek we just had, it being therefore evening, the day same, the first. Ton sabaton. No, that's a false cognate there. Te mia ton sabaton. Look at how the article and the, of the week, the first of the week. Kai ton thuron, and the doors. kai ton thuron. Keklesmenon. Keklesmenon. Okay, let's take that one apart. The fact that we have a kekle rather than a clay, what's that look like? Reduplication. And if we drop the kappa epsilon and say klesmenon, does that start looking like anything we might recognize? It's a participle, okay? And it's a participle, it's actually a perfect middle passive participle of klio, kappa, lambda, epsilon, iota, omega. Perfect middle passive participle. So, having been shut. The doors having been shut, closed, secured. You could say locked, maybe. Hopu. Right, hopu, where? Isan. Yeah, where were? That's third person, imperfect of Amy. Hoi mathetai, the disciples. Sunegmenoi. Sunegmenoi. Oh, well, this might be we might be dealing with the Textus Receptus here. So let's turn to our German Bible Society and see if we've got the same word. Yeah, that comes after this word. So this is probably a manuscript issue. So let's go. What verse is this? 19? Okay. Yeah, it's not here. We've got a footnote. And the footnote says, yeah, it gives us a bunch of manuscripts that include the variant mathetai sunegmenoi, but it's not in our manuscript. So it's not a majority reading. What it means is gathered, but it's not in your Bible, okay? That's from the Textus Receptus. So gathered, diaton phobon, diaton phobon, ton judeon, through, or because of, the fear of the Judeans. Now, here's a little theological tangent. We go to the RSV and we read in verse 19, on the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being shut where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came. When John refers to the Jews in his gospel, who's he talking about? Okay, that's one option, the Jewish leadership. Another option would be the Jewish people. Another option would be the inhabitants of Judea, right? Now, if you look at David Bentley Hart's 2016 or 2017 translation of the New Testament, he goes on for pages of excursus talking about why he will not translate that as the Jews, because of all of the history of anti-Semitism with people saying, see, look at this, look at this. And so he always just translates it as the Judeans. But those are our three options, basically. When John is always throughout the gospel talking about what the Jews are doing, we can say he's talking about the Jewish people, the Jewish race, right? Or we can say he's talking about the inhabitants of Judea. Or we can say he's talking about the leadership, the temple leadership that, put Jesus on trial and hand him over to Pilate. So what is it? I would agree with you, right? I'm agreeing with David Bentley Hart that if we just say the Jews without explaining that in any way, there are a lot of people who are going to run with that for anti-Semitism and say, Christ killers and different libels like that. So we just have to be careful when we encounter that word, how we're going to translate it. Now, you can disagree, and you can say, well, I'm just going to take it literally. Fine. And there are other... The Bible says, right, and there are other passages in the Gospels that are problematic, right? In Matthew, his blood be upon us and upon our children, right? You can see how, if you wanted to be an anti-Semite, you're going to, flip your Bible open to that sticky tab. And I have encountered that in this county, in religious leaders. Okay? So this is a real issue in 2018 in Sheboygan. So I just, that's a different way to circle that word. Just consider how you might translate that word. Not to change the meaning of the word, but to say, let's look at the meaning of the word. So, for fear, through the fear of the Judeans, Ilthen came. Aorist, indicative, active, third person singular of erkomai. Ilthen came ho Jesus. Kai este eiston meson. Este is the aorist indicative active of histemi. Iota, sigma, tau. Eta, mu, iota, with a rough breathing mark on the first iota. Histemi. Okay, pharmacologists, why do we refer to histamine as an inflammatory mediator? You're the one suffering from allergies right now. Why do we get histamine as an inflammatory mediator that's got a polypeptide side chain on it from the verb for to stand? Histamine. Because you can't stand it. No, the reason is that when histamine is released in the body, it's released by specialized epithelial cells called mast cells. And before they degranulate and release histamine and arachidonic acid, they stand up. And so when they're first trying to identify what this compound is, it's the compound released when the cells stand up. Histamine. Now you can sleep, okay? Yeah, I knew you needed to know that, Michelle. Okay, right, so.
I feel better
Now you feel better. Now your allergies are all better because you can. Right. So that's from histemi. So came the Jesus and stood, eisto meson, in the midst, in the middle. Kai lege autois. And says to them, you see how we're playing with tenses here? Yeah, PCL, right. And lege autois. So, you notice how this historical present just shifts here? And it becomes present tense again? Irene. Peace. Humin. To y'all. If you're talking about an irenic sentiment in English, I-R-E-N-I-C, as opposed to ironic. What is irenic? Peacemaking. You know? Well, that was an irenic response. Well, he's trying to make peace, right? You know, so, Irene humin, peace to y'all. Verse 20. Kai tuto ipon, and this. Ipon, again, circle it, it's participle of, it's an aorist participle of lego, and this having said. Edaitsen is the aorist indicative active third person singular of deiknumi. So it's a me class verb. You don't know the endings for this. Deiknumi is a me class verb. And so he showed. Deiknumi would be I show. Autois, them, or to them. Tas kairos. Tas kairos. The hands. Kai tein pluran autu. And the side or chest of him. If you're suffering from pleurisy, or you have a pleural effusion, what? You've got a chest inflammation. Right? Pleural. Where are we? Exarisan. No. Exarisan. Aorist, indicative, passive of Cairo. So, chi alpha iota rho omega Cairo. Rejoiced. Cairo, I rejoice. And no, that's a false cognate with the name of the Egyptian city, all right? There's no connection. Rejoiced un. Rejoiced therefore. Rejoiced then. Hoi mathetai. The disciples. Idontes. Participle. Aorist participle of orao. Having seen. Ton kurion. Having seen the Lord.
What is the aorist?
It is the aorist participle.
Is that Dante's?
Idontes. Aorist participle, third person, plural of orao. There's Scooby-Doo again. They haven't just blepoed him. Rejoiced then, rejoiced therefore the disciples, having seen, having known, having experienced the Lord. What does RSV do with us? Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, peace be with you. It's really peace to y'all, but peace be with you, all right? When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. They were glad? They're kind of like, oh yeah, that's cool, man. You know? Hey, here, have a drink. It's like, it's a little stronger than they were glad, I think. But why would the RSV say they were glad? it did in the King James. And the RSV is going to try to default a lot back to King James usage. And so to be glad in Jacobean English is a lot stronger. But now it's just like, and they were glad. Oh, hey, great, We get off early today. It's early closing, early dismissal. One more verse. Ipen, un, said therefore, autois, to them, ho Jesus, palin, again, irene humin, peace to y'all. Kathos, just as. Apestalkein, has sent forth. He has sent from apostello. It's a perfect from apostello. Perfect indicative active, not perfect aorist. You can't have perfect aorist. Those are two different. Okay. Kathos apestalken me ho pater, just as has sent forth me the Father, kago, should be able to find it in the lexicon. I also, Pempo, lexical form. I send. I also send humas, y'all. I also send y'all. Kago or kathos means as or just as. And you can find that in the lexicon. Now, we're going to throw another theological question at you here. But we're going to look at it in the RSV first. Verse 21. Jesus said to them again, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I send you. Question. When Jesus says this to the disciples, let's assume for a minute, how many folks we got here? Yeah? We've got 8 plus me. So let's say these are the 8 being sent and I'm the one doing the sending. If I say, I'm sending y'all, am I sending you as a group? Or am I sending you and you and you and you and you? How am I sending you? Let's say I'm addressing the church, ten ecclesian. I'm sending the gathering, the assembly, the church. I'm sending y'all. Is Jesus talking to the gathering or each person in the gathering? Yes. Good biblical answer. All of the above is usually the safest answer when you come up with a question like that. That we individually have to experience being sent or called or whatever it might be. But that because we read this in conjunction with all of Scripture, we know that he wants us to do this together. And, for example, when he sends out the 70, how does he send them out? 2 by 2, yeah, right? And then we get Paul and Barnabas and John Mark and Paul and Silas, and we're supposed to do this together. But we do it together because each one of us is individually responding. And we need the rest of y'all around each one of us to keep that response active, because left to our own devices, each one of us at some point is going to say, maybe I've done enough. Or maybe that doesn't look like a place I really want to go. Fair enough? So, what are we going to do next week? Well, I really think we should move on to chapter 14, folks. I mean, we've spent some time. We're going to continue in this translation. We're going to finish this translation through the end of John chapter 20. And you really do need to dive into lesson 14 and do the homework in lesson 13 and lesson 14. Now, I'm not expecting you to just have lesson 13 down, my, psi, ta, and all that. But do be practicing that, because the more we do this, the more we do this, the more we do this. Now, let's look ahead a minute. So we've got to figure out where we're going to get this here. If we sit there and we keep going, we see that in lesson 14, we're going to look at secondary middle passive endings, and that includes aorist passive indicatives and subjunctives. Then in lesson 15, which we won't get to next week, we're not going to do. We're just going to say that's a review. And so we say lesson 15 is a review of omega class verbs. But when we get to lesson 15 and, review all those, there's no homework. Lesson 16, we're going to get a new set of endings, third declension nouns. And you're just going to be making some good charts, so we're going to breeze through that. Right? We're just... And we see lesson 17, we're getting some neuter nouns, and lesson 18, more pronouns, interrogatory, indefinite, relative, and reflexive, some of which we've already used in our translations. So, theoretically, we have 2 more classes, unless we decide to say, we're going to end at 14 and use 15 as a review and say anything else is on your own. Or we say we're going to keep going beyond May. Or, I don't know, I'm open to suggestions. We have a total of 23 lessons here. I'm only counting, 25 lessons. Here's my suggestion to you. We will stop in 2 weeks. And there are a lot of lessons we haven't gotten to. My suggestion to you is keep going back through what you've done. And then let's order some good endings charts that you can have. And then try to practice this at least once a week so that you're starting to get fewer and fewer things you circle and starting to identify more and more things that might be cool theological issues. And discern over the summer if you want to keep going. If you want to keep going, then in the fall we'll regroup and use a different textbook and, kind of take a slightly different approach. Or we'll just play with translations and get into theological debates. So it doesn't have to be, we're going weekly through a text. It could be that this class might evolve into a Bible study where we do it on a basis of trying to translate and where we do it maybe even just using some interlinear help to do that. But start sitting there, and if we're doing a Bible study on the resurrection account in John, we keep stopping and saying what's happening to the voice or mood of the verb. What's happening here with these different verbs for seeing or knowing or perceiving. So it could be a different kind of Bible study that way more than studying the grammar and learning the language. We've got time to pray and discern that. To pray about and discern that. So let me know where you want to go with that. And let's talk to our fellow classmates as well. And it's somebody's turn to pray. I'm looking for a volunteer. Nobody makes eye contact now. Mother Michelle will pray.
Lord God, we thank you for this time, for this language that is fascinating, for our discovery of what is really being said. I ask that you be with us, that you help us discern where we're going, what we need to do next as a class. Be with us this evening. Be with Dad as he's away. All this we ask in Jesus' name.
Amen. Where's Mike?
Well, he's still in Florida,
Oh, I knew that.
but he's